Good afternoon, everybody. I am beyond thrilled to welcome our special guest today, Norma Kamali, and in many ways a woman who needs no introduction, and someone who is also an alum of FIT, so we're also very happy to welcome her back. She did at one point ask me if this was one of the buildings, so I think FIT has changed and grown quite a lot since then. I almost couldn't do this conversation, partly because Norma's had an amazing career, but beyond that, she's done so much personally. She's someone, as I said, who has training here at FIT. She's traveled the world. She was in London very early on, bringing material back to American audiences. She has interest in the arts, all areas of music and culture, both in the UK and the US. And as I was talking to her earlier, Norma's an amazing designer because she has skills in virtually all areas of fashion design. Brilliant illustrator, but she's also someone who can actually construct clothes. And Norma, I think you said something like 90% of the patterns that you use are the end result of your swimwear, that you do that many.
Well, yeah, swimwear to me is something I love to do personally. You know, reading a book is fun and exciting, but when I do swimwear patterns, I get the same kind of feeling. It's a very zen, satisfied feeling.
Yeah. And one of the things I was going to ask you, we want to start off a little bit about your own personal style, because on the one hand, it's very distinctive. I love it because it's slightly retro, it's very glamorous, but it's also functional and relatable. And I was wondering if you tell me what the date is of you here at the sewing machine. As you can see, I have left, and I don't have a date on that.
I think it's probably... It's definitely early 70s, definitely. And the one,
yeah, I think
the
that was
other one is
I have it down as 87.
87, yeah, probably.
And I love this one too. You can see the variety. Always recognizable as Norma, but someone who embraces so much. And I think this is one of the other things that we love about your work so much. One of the things also, Norma, is that you have a strong philosophy and belief in taking care of yourself, this idea that health has to go hand in hand with any area of life. And I'm wondering how that started for you.
Well, I think everybody can acknowledge that when you feel good about yourself, you feel healthy and you feel like you look good, your self-esteem and body image are definitely affected. And when a woman feels good about herself, she's pretty invincible. There's like, you can't get in her way.
Yeah.
So from working with women for so many years, we're so afflicted with so many issues about how pretty we are, how perfect we are or not perfect, and it really takes us down. So I started to try to think of something beyond a dress to try to help women feel good about themselves.
And speaking of that, I want to touch base on a few of the key design elements. Norma's designed so much over her career that we really can't cover it all, but I think it's important to start with one of the things that I remember when I was a young woman is this collection using sweatsuit material. And the thing that struck me so much, Norma, is that you're decades ahead of everybody else. The concept of athleisure, which we hear quite a lot now, is something that's very common, people wearing yoga clothes as street clothes, but you were doing this way, way before everyone else. Where did these ideas come from?
Well, I was actually designing cover-ups for swimwear, and I was an avid swimmer. And every time I would get out of the water, I'd put a sweatshirt on. And at the time, the only place you would buy a sweatshirt was at an Army-Navy store where boys and men bought work clothes and that kind of thing. And so I got gray sweatshirting, and I was proceeding to do cover-ups. And then I did a jacket, and then I did a gown, and I did a pant. And before I knew it, I had this thing that was bigger than I was, and I was overwhelmed by it.
And this is one of my favorite photos of that whole series here with Farrah Fawcett in the early 1980s. But Norma, you always gave it a sense of femininity. There's always a sense of the female body as well as form and function on this. Did this come out of your own need is in terms of lifestyle? Like you said, you needed a cover-up, so you were going to take it to the various degrees. Did you make all of these styles for yourself as well?
Well, actually, when I was at FIT, I was studying fashion illustration, and I was also taking a lot of life classes, and I'd taken life drawing even before I came to FIT. And my initial goal in life was to be a painter, and Michelangelo was my god. And my mother said, you better learn somehow to earn a living, and I got a scholarship to FIT, so I thought, well, maybe I can parlay drawing, but I was always interested in the body, and I really had no interest in fashion design. I was really interested in drawing and painting the human form more than anything, so that obviously translated.
Does this have something to do with the fact that you're able to craft the clothes so well? Were you interested in the technical part of fashion initially, or was this something that you picked up in school and then developed later?
Well, I have to say I was so anti-fashion at the time, because when I came to FIT, this was still the Mad Men era, and the corsets and all of that sort of coordinated hat and gloves. And I will tell you that FIT students were dressed that way. I was not, and I was really one of the outcasts, and I had a painter mentality, and fashion to me was, I didn't like it until I started, when I graduated and ended up getting a job in the airline to travel, and here I was in London at the very beginning of the next phase, which was So Me. And then I said, oh, I can do this fashion thing. This is different. So there was definitely a switch from one era to another. But just picture FIT, handbags, matching hats, gloves, seriously, corsets, girdles, garter belts, stockings, not pretty.
Yeah.
Not pretty.
And there are photographs of you coming back and forth from London, really looking
Yes.
very avant-garde. Yeah.
Not looking like, and when I came back after, and this was the very beginning in London, very, very beginning. I remember going to King's Road to a boarding house somebody told me about. It was $6 a night, and I thought, I have to, okay. It was on Draycott Avenue, and I thought, okay, I'm getting a place there. And I remember going out on King's Road, and there were 2 shops that were bright colors, and everything was gray. And I said, something's going on there. And the hairs on my arms, so I was drawn to it like a butterfly. I had to go. And I was there every weekend for 4 years, ladies and gentlemen. And each week, there was another store with color, another paint, another building of color, people wearing color, energy, music, excitement. And so I would come back, and my skirt would go up, up, up. And before that, it's Mad Men time. Nobody is wearing a skirt above their knees, so cars were screeching. I was definitely labeled the prostitute of whatever, because I was showing my knees, and they just kept getting shorter and shorter. And I was definitely, when I was there, I felt right in the moment. When I came here, I was so taken back by the fact that it was still Motown music,
Right.
and nobody was listening to
Right.
any guitars or anything like that, that
Yeah.
it was still, we were still so far behind the energy of what was happening there.
Interesting. But there's something also about this concept of the body. The swimsuit becomes another element of your career that is so definable. I think this may be one of the most famous photographs, certainly of the 1960s. It sort of defines it, and here is Farrah Fawcett wearing your work. And I think also you become even better known by the second half of the 1970s. What was it about the bathing suit, Norma, that drew you to this process of creating in this way?
Well, like I said, I'd loved to swim, and I'd spent so much time with anatomy and learning to draw and movement and form, and I loved dance. Rudolf Nureyev was on my wall, Michelangelo all over, so that was what I was seeing. So a swimsuit covers a very small part of the human form.
Right.
And so understanding that a swimsuit is like a piece of sculpture, it's got all sides and they all have to work together. So I really loved it personally, and it was just intuitively something I was going to do.
Yeah.
And this cover actually launched me now, in perspective, 1977, swimsuits were low leg. They were not high leg. And swimsuits were printed. There were a lot of flower prints. Swimsuits were cotton with elastic threading in them. So using this fabric in a solid, in a high leg, was very off the charts. And when Sean, who was Scavolo's stylist, came and said, I want to put that on the cover of Cosmo, I was like, really? You're going to do that? And he said, I'm doing it. And the beauty of it is that, shockingly, it put me in the swimwear business. But I remember Bloomingdale's coming up to see the collection because everybody was talking about it. And they came up, and I had a model to show the swimsuits. And they just got up and walked out. And I'd never done wholesale before, and I thought, wow, this is weird, the way wholesale business is run. and then it wasn't that much, maybe 10 years later, that I happened to be in a meeting with the woman that got everybody to get up and leave, and I understood a little bit more that wasn't really the way wholesale was done. And I could not keep it in, and it was like a different kind of business meeting completely. And I said, you know, I'll never forget my impression of what the wholesale business was when you got up and walked out. She said, oh dear, we really loved it, but it wasn't right. I said, well, you could have said goodbye. But it was, you know, that's how you learn.
There we are. But you know, the thing is, here we have your incredible swimsuits, and I'm sure all of you are familiar with these images. The thing that strikes me, and what so many people have said, though, is that it fits so many different body types, Norma, and that's got to be at the base of what you do. Like you said, respect for the body, but respect for women in particular, because there's probably no more terrifying garment for us to put on and wear in public than
Definitely.
a swimsuit. Yeah.
Definitely.
But we're flipping through these quickly because we do want to give all of you a chance to talk to Norma as well. The other thing you talked about was dance, and I was wondering if you could talk just a little bit about your interaction with Twyla Tharp, because I believe you did costumes for 3 of her works.
And some other things too, some smaller dances that she's done. Well, Twyla, Richard Avedon introduced us before Twyla did In the Upper Room, and these are pictures from the costumes for In the Upper Room. And In the Upper Room, Twyla Tharp, for those of you who may not know, is probably one of the most innovative modern dance choreographers ever. And she is so innovative and creative. And In the Upper Room was the first time a choreographer took ballet dancers and modern dancers and put them in the same dance. And so it was so much fun to work with her on that. And we've done a lot of things together since then, and she's a dear friend who I just love and respect. And I did costumes for The Wiz, for Sidney Lumet's film too, and a lot of dance things that were
we'll come back to this.
Lots of fun.
Exactly.
That's actually, there you go, you have pictures.
There we go. I just want to go back to this just for a moment, because one of the things that's interesting, Norm, is that you bring together so many different elements, including some retro, because there's images of you as well as your ad campaigns that sort of reference periods like the 1940s, which was a great heyday for female designers, particularly in New York. You had Claire McCardle and many others. I'm wondering, did that time period speak to you particularly for that reason, or others?
Well, there was a period of time for me, these actually were billboard campaigns. They were big billboards in Times Square. I think there's a classic, timeless beauty that is American that was a big part of the movies of the 30s and 40s.
Right.
And my generation watch those movies on television. And how could you not be influenced by the classic, I mean, that face is still a classic,
That's
timeless
right.
face.
Right.
The hair, the makeup, the just everything about the clothes are still red carpet clothes.
Yes.
There's
Yes.
nothing different on the red carpet.
Right.
So the American fashion doesn't really have a deep, long history, but American film is really where the classic, timeless American fashion, to me, has its roots.
Yeah, that's a great point. And just again to show these incredible things, this is really coming off of your parachute idea.
Yeah.
And again, talk about survival. If you ever jump out of an airplane in your ball gown, there you are, you're ready to go.
Right.
Norma, how did the parachute idea come about?
Well, this is a little bit of a controversial story. I had my store on Madison Avenue on the second floor, and Halston's store was literally doors away. And Victor Hugo was his assistant and a very influential force in Halston's life. And Victor and I were very good friends. Victor spent so much time in my store that you wouldn't know where he really belonged, right? And so I did a swimsuit that wrapped around the body, and it was one piece of fabric, and it was a wrap, diaper wrap kind of swimsuit. And I guess Victor liked it. And so I see the cover of Time magazine, and my swimsuit is on the cover, except it says Halston. So I was so hurt and so upset, and I didn't say anything, but Victor called me and he said, I owe you a big favor. I'm so sorry. He said, I want you to come. Halston's going to be away. I want you to come to Halston's house on Saturday. I said, I'm not going. And he said, no, you must go. You have to let me say I'm sorry. And so I go to Halston's house. Halston's house was a brownstone where the interior was cut out, and you can see the skylight all the way at the top.
And it's for sale for $40 million.
By the way.
Yeah.
And there was a big ottoman right at the bottom, and on the first balcony, so Victor told me to close my eyes and sit on the ottoman, and on the first balcony he dropped a parachute on me. And he said, I know that you're going to do great things with this, and this is my way of paying you back.
There we are. Let
there you
someone
go.
steal your idea.
So it was good. I don't care about Time magazine.
Yeah.
This is totally better.
And this dress is so amazing. This was also in our Impact exhibition in 2012.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because when we asked the designers, this was a celebration of the CFDA's 50th anniversary, your piece and Tom Brown's piece were the first to arrive. And they were extraordinary garments, but both of them had a lot of feathers on them. And I thought, I wondered if this was a portent to come. I was wondering if that was going to be one of the themes. But as much as these are innovative, Norma, what we're really thrilled with is the sleeping bag coat. We know that you created it as early prototypes as early as 1973, and the version that we have is from 1977. And this coat has been a star. This may be the one item that I think people most closely associate with you. It was a great seller then. When I went to college in the late 70s, I had one, which meant that young women could afford it. It was not just for the elite. And it is still being worn today. We're going to see some examples. I'm wondering, Norma, if you could tell everybody how you came up with this incredible idea.
In the early 70s, I used to go camping a lot. And I would go upstate and canoeing and camping. I loved it. And I would sleep in my sleeping bag in a tent. And one night, it was really cold. It was getting towards the end of August. And you had to go out in the woods if you wanted to kind of do whatever. And so I just said, there's no way I'm going out there. I picked up my sleeping bag. I put it over me. As I'm walking into the woods, I'm thinking, oh my God, this is such a great coat. So I went back home. I took my sleeping bag and I cut a coat out of it, and I didn't waste one part of the sleeping bag. And that pattern is exactly the same pattern I've used since 1973 to today.
Fabulous.
And it's really incredible because the coat functions. It's really not a design that you would call fashion. So it's more of a commodity, and I think that's the reason for its survival.
But it also is so versatile. The fact that you can see movie stars wearing it in every variation, and I think these two are my favorite. Nothing like Lady Gaga with one. And then also making it for someone, Andre Leon Talley size. I think he's, what, 6'7" or something? He's a very, very tall man. And the idea that it could still resonate, I think, is one of the things. But the other thing that's very important, again, and I said it earlier, and I want people to remember this, is that designers like Norma don't spend a lot of time advertising herself. She spends a lot of time making clothes. And I think this is why you come up with ideas that everyone has copied, from the high-heeled sneaker to athleisure to this idea. And we've seen people like Martin Margiela in the late 90s come up with his duvet coat. It's basically Norma's sleeping bag coat. The filling is different, but basically the idea is exactly the same. And so, Norma, I'm wondering what you feel about this, because one of the great highlights of your career, I think was wonderful, is when you got the Lifetime Achievement Award from the CFDA. There's nothing like your colleagues stepping up and saying, we recognize your contributions. What do you think about this?
Well, it's very nice, and you know, through the years, I just have to preface this by saying, you know, in your career, in a fashion career especially, if you decide right up front what your goals are. So my goal was to have a creative life. For me, that was really so important, and to have creative freedom. So I knew if I could be an entrepreneur and do that, that would guarantee it. But it also meant a struggle to pay bills, to not have partners. And through the years, I have had partners. I've had many collaborations that have helped fund my company. But when you don't have big funding and you choose the creative life, other people claim what you've done as theirs. So there are many examples of that I personally would feel, oh, you know, well, and then I have another idea, that's okay.
Right.
And so I always knew I had another idea, so I never really got mad about it or upset about it, but I understood that if I had the money to shout about it, it would have helped, but then maybe I wouldn't have freedom.
Yeah.
So there are choices you make throughout your career, and I made the right choice for me. I'm not going to be the most famous designer in the world. I'm not going to be the richest in the world, but I don't need anything more than I have, because I have a creative life, and what could you ask for that could be better than that for me?
Right.
So to be recognized was extraordinary, and I never expected it, because my expectations are never for fame or fortune or any of that. So it was something that happened that I never thought would, and I don't expect.
Right.
So that was very sweet.
And, you know, OMO has always been sort of your, on my own has been, I think, your motto throughout your career. The one thing I did also want to say is, Norma looks extraordinary. I bet you all would have no idea that she's in her 70s, exercises every day, and I think one of the things that also motivates you, Norma, if I may, is that your positive outlook on life. You're very positive and supportive. And so again, we have a lot of students here, and I hope you will take this opportunity to please introduce yourself, come and ask questions to the great Norma Kamali. Norma, thank you so much for joining us. Don't be shy. Here we have a young lady coming up.
I am not a student here. I am very shy about standing up, but I want to say to you that I had a pink sweatshirt of yours when I was a kid. I think there is no piece of clothing I have ever loved in my entire life as much as that sweatshirt. And what was terrific about it, besides the color, which was a pink that was like happiness, you know, was that there are these garments one has that you put on and it imbues you with a sensation. And it was a sense of sort of joy and serenity, and also, I think, speaking to your sense of how women feel self-esteem and how they, it's how you appear to yourself.
Yeah.
That was like a little Wonder Woman cape, just putting it on. So thank you, it was beautiful.
Thank you very much. That's actually very nice, and it's something, one of the good fortunes I get is when I meet women who've bought something maybe yesterday or 50 years ago, if you can imagine, that's how long I've been doing this. There's a story that is so personal and so fantastic, and I'm sure many designers hear stories like that. But the effect of clothing, color, fabric on women and how we feel is really very powerful. And I used to think that my job as a fashion designer was very superficial. I worry about a quarter of an inch on a hem. What can that be doing for the world? I should be curing cancer. Well, I don't have the ability or the brain set for that. But once I understood that I could make somebody feel good, that really became my mantra. If I can make somebody feel good, that's a big deal. And so I'm so happy that that pink, and I remember that pink, I spent a lot of time choosing that right color pink, and it was important that and I'm so happy that it made you feel that way. It makes me feel fantastic.
I was wondering if you can talk about how I know you said you love swimming, and I also love swimming and love all your swimsuits. And I was just wondering, because you've been doing swimsuits for so long, just how your designs in that area have evolved, or your thoughts on it, or your fabrics, or just anything about your process at swim.
Swimwear is super complicated because you're dealing with women's psyche, not just the design. And so I don't put that first, but I'm aware of it. So comfort is really important to me, and fit. And the longevity of the suit is important. So those are kind of back here. Then each time has something, some influence, and not necessarily a fashion influence. Swimwear sort of overrides fashion, which is why it's so great. So I feel as a swimmer, there's one kind of swimsuit that I like. There's a certain feeling I like about certain swimsuits. I don't want to feel the swimsuit when I'm swimming. Then there are other swimsuits that are swimsuits that work for the body, work around the body, decorate the body, and that's the fun part. So I just go intuitively with all the things I told you, and then I do whatever the hell I want. I want to have a good time, and I love designing swimwear. So if I'm not having a good time, then it's not going to be a great swimsuit. So I think if I'm enjoying it, then people are going to have a good time too.
I like that. Awesome. Thank you.
Hi, I loved your comment about when you were crafting your first sleeping bag coat, about how you used every element of the sleeping bag.
Yes.
I know that in a lot of fashion programs, certainly here in New York, the concept of a zero waste garment is taught in curriculum. And I'm wondering if you have any words of wisdom coming from the industry and coming from mass production and mass waste production techniques and industry standards, if you have any words of wisdom for designers who are trying to be sustainable in that sort of zero waste department.
You know, it's a great question because there's even a bigger question that goes with that. So zero waste, sustainability, all of that is super important. But what's even more important is think about the millennial mindset. How old are you?
I'm 34.
So you're a baby. But so I can ask anybody how old they are because I'm okay with them asking me, all right? So your generation around the world do not want to sit at sewing machines for their livelihood. It's not going to happen. It's going to disappear. Your generation is not looking at anything in the same way, which is fantastic, but it's also hugely disruptive, making everybody crazy. But we need to really think about, well, if people aren't going to sit at sewing machines, what's going to happen? If sustainability is really important, what do we do? There's a list of questions, and there should be, I'm sure there are courses here on this, but I would love to teach the course because not really.
I can see the deans now racing
Not
down
really.
to the Half Auditorium,
So
signing you up.
booked, but I really feel very strongly that everything that I know and that I've learned through my career has to get thrown away. It's like I am shedding my skin right now like a snake and saying, how am I making clothes if people don't want to sew? How am I making clothes that really need to connect to the environment? What are we doing? Zero waste, all of that. So your generation has to come up with, and I'm playing with that myself. Fortunately, I do have history, so I know what to refer to, but you can look at it in a different way and come up with good solutions too. And I think you need to think about all of those things. It is critically important that we look at the world from a manufacturing perspective. What should come back here and be domestic production? What makes sense to come back here? What's going to be good for our business community, our environment? There are many things that need to come back here. And maybe to Puerto Rico. I think we should rebuild Puerto Rico and make it a manufacturing state of the USA and build housing around it. I have a big mouth, so you can be sure I'm telling everybody on the planet about that. But I do think everything needs to be rethought, and how we repurpose clothes for people who need shelter, how we repurpose everything so it has a dual purpose. It's such an exciting time that you need to just go with it and have a good time.
Thank you. And also to draw on what Christopher Brewer said earlier about not just being interdisciplinary, but multidisciplinary, I think that is sort of the solution to a lot of these problems.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Thank you. And Deborah?
Hello, Norma. I've been collecting your things since the 80s. I have closets full of jerseys and coats and swimsuits, and I just want to tell you, this summer when I had a little extra me, your swimsuit was still fabulous on the beach, and I got the most compliments from everybody. But one of the things I wanted to ask you about, I love coming to your store on 56th Street, and that you often have vintage pieces from prior seasons along with present lines. I'd love to hear you talk about how you've maintained your vintage collection, how it inspires you, and just the habit of interspersing it with things that you're doing that are new, because that's a wonderful thing.
I'm going to turn upside down everything you said. So when I turned 50, I had a revelation that the beautiful house I was living in that I totally restored, that the 20,000 original samples I had in the warehouse, all of it had to go if I was going to reinvent myself. And when you turn 50, if you haven't already, get ready to reinvent yourself. That is the big reinvention date. So I decided, get rid of everything. I got rid of all of my clothes. I had a sale at Christie's for all the things I collected, and so down to nothing, just down to minimal, minimal, minimal. Till today, if you come to my house, there is not a tchotchke, there's nothing that I'm not using. If I don't use it, I give it away. I sponsor a class at Art and Design High School. They get all my excess fabric, all my samples, give it away. So there's a girl who does PR in my company who's obsessed with Norma Kamali vintage. Obsessed. And she was going into this warehouse that I forgot we even had, that I thought was just financial papers, and she finds a room with more. And I said, no, don't show it to me. I don't want to look back. I don't want to see it. She said, oh my God, this is great, this is great. Anyway, so she's the one that has been pushing to mix the vintage in, which was okay. I agreed that that was not a bad thing. And she got us in this vintage show, and she is totally responsible. I tell her not to show me anything. She'll ask me, what happened when you did this? I'm like, I can't. No. So the truth is, I don't really want to look at the past. I really appreciate everything I did in the past. I appreciate referencing chronologically what I've done, but I don't look at a specific dress. There may be a style that is relevant today. So there's a swimsuit that everybody has. I've done studs on it. It's gotten so much press, and it's a swimsuit that Marissa found in one of mine that she found in a vintage store, and she came back. She said, "You have to do this again." I said, "Nobody will wear that." She said, "Please put it on the line." I said, "I'll put it on the line, but if it doesn't sell, it's coming right off. And I'm naming it after you, so good, bad, ugly, it's named after you." So the Marissa swimsuit was a big hit, and she talks about it all the time.
This is what millennials do for you.
Yes,
so
they
this is
do.
great. Norma, thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I have just cut this lady off. She has a story for us. I'm so sorry.
And I told a friend of mine I was coming to see Norma Kamali. She said,
Speak
"Oh,
into
Norma Kamali."
speak into the microphone. Yeah, thank you.
I told a friend of mine I was coming to see Norma Kamali. She says, "Norma Kamali, I love her. She says, I have a sweatshirt dress. She had a sweatshirt dress. And she was taking this dance class. And whenever she had a date, she would wear this dress to dance class with no underwear. The teacher didn't like her. The dance teacher didn't like her. But on the days that she wore that dress, he was like, "Hello, Miss Wilson, how are you?" She said that dress, she loved that dress. So I had to share that with you.
Okay. I think it was probably she felt a certain way in the dress, and she became more attractive to everyone. It shows you that how you feel about yourself changes the way other people feel about you. So, lessons to be learned. It's not the dress. Thank you, guys.
so much, Norma.